Hello, and welcome to Diana's Makerspace on this April 30th, 2025. Today I'd like to show a project where I'm going to make a basic skirt with elastic from just basic materials, a 36 by 24, 36 by 44 wide fabric, all cotton that I bought at Walmart, and also some other things. Using my Singer M1000 sewing machine. Let's start. Now, as you can see, this is my crafting station. I have my smock that I use when I work. Now, these are the materials that I'm going to be using for the sewing project. As you can see, Waverly 1 yard fabric, 100% cotton, 36 by 44 inches. Guggenheim shears, a small bit of elastic, so not just a little bit of a cinch elastic waistband, the Singer M1000 sewing machine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a basic skirt with a 20 inch length, and then basic hem. So let me show you how the first few steps. Well, now the first step to do is to measure the skirt along the hem. And as you can see, basically, I don't have enough fabric to do it one way. So what we're going to do is basically we'll take the fabric the other way. Which means basically what we do is we rearrange the clasp. And again, we get it. And what you do is just take it. Remember, you're using craft, so be careful. Just a little bit. So I'm gonna do it so you can see frontwise. And what you want to do is you want to take the fabric, just put it together. You want to go around your hips because that's the widest part of your body. And then take it in. But you want to give yourself a little bit of length. Then once you take it in, what you do is you grab it with 2 fingers, like I'm doing. And you take the clip. Like, whoops, almost. There you go. Take a clip. Now what you want to do is you want to give yourself a little bit of length. Just give yourself a little bit more to work with, like that. Or maybe a little bit more, like that, just a minute. There you go. Now just carefully slide it off. Step out of it. And as you can see, you got the first part of your skirt. Now next step is to sew this in together. Now the next step of the process is I cut the fabrics and I put the clip. Also, you'll notice that I set a 25-minute timer because for those of us with ADHD, we do lose track of time. So this works on a certain method where you focus your efforts so that basically you use your time effectively. Now the next step of this is I'm going to take the fabric long side to long side, and I'm going to do a stitch where I seam the fabric. I'm just going to fix this one edge here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a zigzag stitch because since I don't have a serger, I rather do a zigzag stitch. So The first step is what you always do. And again, I like to use a wider seam allowance. A lot of people like to use 5/8. I like to use something a little bit bigger, just to give me something to play with a little bit. Let's see. Maybe I can go a little closer. Let's see. Let's do it this way. I'll just pull it out as I go. So what I'm going to is I'm going to a 20 centimeter seam allowance. So what you need to do is get everything set up. And remember, when you're sewing, this isn't a car lace. It's not about sewing fast. It's about sewing slow and good. So let's begin. Now we did a back stitch. Now I just hold the fabric so it stays steady. And notice I'm keeping the fabric inside the silver arm of the Singer. So basically, it's about 15 centimeters, no, 15 millimeters, excuse me, 15 millimeters. So about a little bit about, it's like 5/8. It's close to 5/8. It's about 0.6 of an inch for those of us that still work on the English measurement scale. Now notice how I'm holding the fabric to keep it from, and if the fabric should move, you just turn it slightly. And then what you can do is you can lift up the presser foot and you can rotate it. And notice how I'm just doing a few stitches at a time like that though. So you just want to do a few stitches at a time. So basically, you keep it steady, and this will help eliminate puckering. Like that, though. Again, notice how I sew slow. This isn't fast. It's not about who can sew the fastest. It's about who can sew the best, and who can actually do a good seam. And what you want to do is, if you're pinning or using clamps, you don't want to get too close to your clamps, because basically you could break your needle, and that's not a fun thing to have happen like that though. So now you can see basically it's coming along. And notice how I'm moving the fabric onto the table as it goes along so it doesn't slide down. Give yourself enough space. And also give yourself enough time. Sometimes I can talk with friends while I'm doing this, other times I can't. When I'm doing critical sewing, I normally don't talk with friends while I'm doing this, because basically sometimes I make mistakes if I'm trying to do critical sewing. Again, if you get outlined, just gently maneuver it so you get it back in line, like that though. And pace yourself, because basically remember always to pace yourself. And what I do is I set 25 minutes, because basically like I said, for those of us with ADHD, we tend to lose track of time and can be rather obsessive compulsive. So 25 minutes, and then I may take a mandatory break. So I'll do as much as I can for 25 minutes. Almost there. Now my next purchase is a serger, so basically I can make these edges better, and I'm planning to get that at the beginning of May. always do a back stitch and then move forward and then just turn the wheel a little bit until you can hear the click and pull it out. And like what Gertie mentions on Charm Studio, it's always good to cut your threads, because basically it saves a lot of difficulty later, like that. So, whoops, got one thing that got caught in there. And this is the reason why you cut your threads, because if you're wearing a pinning thing on your wrist. Now let me show you what it looks like. As you can see, you can so it may be a little bit hard to see, but let's see. You can see what the stitch looks like. It's pretty steady. Now the next step, what I'm going to do is, normally people like to do this last, but I'm actually going to stitch. I'm actually going to hem the bottom half. So let's begin by hemming the bottom half like that, though. So in this case, I'm going to use pins, because basically I just want to make sure that basically everything is all set. So let's see. Let's start from this end. So let's do it. Now remember, bad side to bad side. So as you can see, when you do the hem, this is the good side, that's the bad side. So basically like this. I normally like to take it 1 inch in just to give me a little bit of play. And now the other thing what I do is also basically, it's a matter of, when you do the hemming, is something always important to do whenever you're not using the sewing machine. Power down. Because what happens if you don't have it powered down, you could run into difficulty, and that could cause some other problems like that, though. So the thing to do is do what I'm doing, is take the hem, take it down as far as you can, and try to make it as level as possible, and take it in big sections. So basically, as you can see, basically what I'm doing, I took one big section. Now I'm going to take this big section and go down a little bit. And this is the hardest part, is getting over the seam allowance like this. So what I do is I hem, put a pin in over the seam allowance, and then what I do is take this again, as you can see, go straight. Make sure you go straight, and make sure you give yourself enough fabric at the end there, because it's very tricky at this point not to run low on fabric at the end like that, though. So it can be very tricky. So put a pin in. Now let's move it again. Now you can see we're getting near the end there. And as you can, let me see if I can fold this better. Now you can see where the pins are. You can see where the pins are on here a little bit, like this. So now the next step is basically just to get this started. And see, we got about 10 minutes left before we do a break. So what we do is move the sewing machine close to us. Again, we leave power up. Always have the machine off when you're not using it, because many people have made mistakes, and it can be so weird like that, though. And when you sew, you notice how I just have the first pin here up here. This is just to help set the guide like that, though. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this first pin, and I'm actually going to move it down here. to set. And also, what you want to do is you want to make sure you put them in straight, that they point either out or the straight, but they don't point in like that though. So now the other thing I'm going to do is just reset the machine to a straight stitch, because this one we really don't need a zigzag, because we're not connecting two pieces of fabric. So always pull the thread back stitch, whoops, and whoops, what happened there? Something happened. Ooh. Well, let's take a pause here for a moment. Well, what happened was I temporarily had a pucker, and the pucker caused a loop, which caused a double stitch. Like you can see this little thing right here, this little big mess, and that caused the machine to hiccup and kick out the bobbin. So let's take care of this part. And let's see. And let's take care of that part. And we'll come back later to fix up this stitch here. But that's what caused the machine to have a little bit of a hiccup and throw this out. So let's start again. A little bit further on than we did last time. And remember, always when you're working with the machine, have it on, but when you're not working, have it off. Now back stitch. Now let's do this. And remember, if your fabric isn't moving, you have a pucker and you may have some threads in there, and you may have to go and reset your bobbin if it gets too bad. Now the other thing is, you don't want to sew too close to the needle, as Gertie mentioned in her video. But what I do is I always move the needles down when I get to a certain point, because if you sew too close, you can break your needle on your sewing machine. Because if you're going to sew close to your pinning needles, then you should wear goggles. I know that sounds like industrial arts, but always safety first whenever you're doing anything. Now you can see what I'm doing now is I'm keeping the seam to the outside of the foot. So basically, to keep a consistent seam. And I always like to do my bottom hemming second. I don't like to do it last, because I do a better job when I do it this way. When I hem one straight piece of fabric. And remember, when you start, always start, check your bobbin, make sure you have enough bobbin, because if you don't, you can change it. But sometimes it really, you have to rethread your machine. So always check to make sure you have enough bobbin. That's why we're doing a straight stitch on the hem. Make sure we have enough bobbin. Some of my inspiration for sewing has been Charm Studios by Gertie, and sewing by other people. One person who teaches home economics in Vancouver. Actually, if I was in high school, I would love to have her as my home ec teacher. She's very knowledgeable. She makes it so easy and very comforting. I'm glad now that home ec is now able to both men and women. A friend of mine who went to Lake Forest, his school district in the 1950s allowed guys to take home ec. When I went in Kenosha, it was frowned upon if you took home ec because basically of toxic masculinity that existed in the old Rust Belt. I'm glad that's disappeared now like that though, because home ec is a good skill to use. So what my mother and grandmother did, they taught me how to do it at home along with my dad. My mother would cook, my dad would cook, and my grandparents would cook. So my mother would cook 4 days a week, my dad would cook 3 days a week. And on Thanksgiving, my dad actually made the turkey, which to some people, whoops, got a little pucker. Oh, now we got over it. So on Thanksgiving, my dad would actually make the turkey. So he taught me how to make the turkey, how to make the stuffing. A little bit different compared to some families. And so it's good, it's important to be progressive like that though when you're doing stuff like that. Now what happens, we're coming to another pin. Notice how I took it out before I get too close to the needle. And what happens, you always want to make sure, now see right now I'm having the fabric sort of roll a little bit. So when the fabric rolls, what you do is you take the pin out, repin it, and remember, always try to put the pin sort of straight or point out. And also make sure with the string that you always have the string pointing in the back. And notice how I'm just doing a steady pace. Because remember, this isn't a race. This is not a race. You're not racing to see who gets it first. And when you're in sewing class, whether in college or something else, remember, it's not a race. It's not a race as to who finishes first. It's you're doing quality. So basically think, quality, but quality does not mean deliberately working slow. Because I've had people when I used to work as a medical researcher tell me, well, I'm working for quality. There used to be a common excuse for people to goof off and say they're working slow. That's not working for quality when they say it that way. Someone who's working for quality is doing exactly what I'm doing now. You're observing. Now notice I have a seam. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sew over the seam. When you sew over the seam, make sure the sewing machine goes completely over the seam before you stop it. There you go. And now what happens, we pull the pin out again. And we take it. And we pin. Whoops, just a minute. We pin. And whoops, now we just have to re-guide. Just a minute. And as you can see, what happens, I'm running into just a little bit of puckering. So let me just get this straightened out here. Let's see how to get this straightened out. Okay, now you can see we finished with our first part of this. Now what happens, since this part is folding over, what we're going to do is we're going to just sort of gently sew over this a little bit. Just get this part over the hump here. Now we got it back. The thing is, I'm not a perfect sewer, so basically I try to do my best, but basically I have issues like that though. So it's important basically to know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and also when you do so, make sure you have sharp pins so that they go inside there like that though. Now we're back on track. Whoops, a little bit off. And as you see, basically what you want to do is I keep readjusting this, so just make sure that the hem stays a certain way like that though. So and just if you do have a fold, just do like I do. Take this fold and just gently come down with it. And the main thing to do is basically sometimes you have to readjust. So basically don't be afraid to readjust. So basically take the fold, readjust, and make sure you're straight. Like my dad used to say in engineering, straightness and parallelism are important. And notice how I'm putting the needles in, because you always want to make sure that you maintain a straight seam. And I have my foot off the pedal whenever I'm doing this, because you remember, always safety first. Okay, now let us continue. Let's see. How are we? Smooth this out a little bit. There we go. Let us continue. And what happens, so you always got to make sure you always got just make sure that you always get back on track. And what happens, sometimes you're going to have a little bit of a zigzag seam, because basically if you're working on a lean table like I am, you're gonna have some zigzag seams. That's why my next thing is to get a bigger table, so basically I can do better quality. You do need a bigger table, because I'm using a 4x6 table, which is normally used as a computer table. And also make sure you don't sew too close to the pins. I almost did. I should follow my own advice. Now, an interesting fact about sewing, though, I don't know how many people are fans of the Terminator movies like that, though, but in one of the last Terminator movies Arnold Schwarzenegger made, he was a Terminator who was stuck on Earth. And the character was surprised, though, because when he took her to stay with him, he noticed his van was a sewing van. He made curtains and other stuff. And she thought, well, you're a Terminator, you're a soldier. Why are you making curtains? And many people don't realize, people in the service actually do know how to sew. People in the Navy know how to sew sails. People who sail know how to sew sails, whether they're men or women. A friend of mine who was over when I was sewing, he said, in a way, you remind me when I was on ship about people who used to sew the sails. You have the same technique. And a lot of surgeons and doctors, because I was training to be a surgeon before I left medical research, and sewing is a very important part of that. So just don't think that sewing is just for women's work, as some people think. It's a multi-millennial thing. For thousands of years, people have sewn, both men and women, especially those who are sailors and in the service, as well as those who are med techs in the service, because when people get injured in a field, med techs have to act as surgeons to sew people up to make sure that they can still be alive to get to the hospital. I won't go into details, but Um, it's not only doctors on MASH, so it's also med techs in the field before they get to the MASH unit. And when you do see someone with service, a lot of people say, well, thank you for your service. Friends of mine in the service, they say they prefer to hear, I respect your service, because thank you for your service to them has become a cop-out. So when you see someone say, thank you for your service. I was a civilian military contractor during the first Gulf War, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and a military contract afterwards for the Navy and Air Force for 22 years. I enjoyed the work I did. And what happens to people I work with, many people in the Air Force and Navy I met, I consider my big brothers and my big sisters, because they helped me at a crucial time in my life. Now, when we're getting to the end, you just got to be careful, because sometimes when you're working with cottons, they shift. You got to watch this stuff very carefully. Now, backstitch. And let's take on. Let's see how it looks. Well, tell me what you think. Now the thing is, we can iron this down a little bit, so basically this comes out better. And the other parts where it's a little bit zigzaggy, I'll show you what you do with the parts that's a little bit zigzaggy like this. Now that we got these parts figured out which is zigzaggy, we can turn this faux pas into a little bit of a design creation. So what you do is basically take the needle and go, a little bit more, and go where the faux pas starts, like there. Because since you have it sewed in, now what you can do is just go down until you catch up with the faux pas. So we'll just do this last segment a little bit over. Have a double seam at one end. And what I'm doing is I'm having the fringy part go underneath the hook. Just move the fringy part a little bit out a little bit. There we go. Got it back online. And an interesting thing, I was reading some stories on Kindle about people who are transgender, male to female. One story was about basically written by I'll try to think of the name, but basically it's about someone who was transgendered and transitioned male to female summer, and they were going to start college in the fall as a true gender. Well, one course they needed to start college is they needed to have a fashion course, and the fashion course they took was basically an altering course on how to mend things. And the instructor first didn't want to do it because she thought, well, you really didn't have WOMAC, you didn't know how to sew. And the person convinced her. And what the person does, they go to thrift stores and they remake different items for the fashion class. Well, the person basically during the fashion class, the instructor encouraged them to sell what they make like that, though. So when the parents came home from 2-week vacation, they're surprised that basically the new daughter had actually made so much money to help pay the mortgage and other things. And so basically sewing is a good thing as a second hobby to make extra money, do other things like that. because you'd be surprised how many people actually do stuff. I have friends that ask me to do pants and other stuff, and even tops, and even I worked on someone's formal dress. So it's interesting how much people will ask you to do things, and you can get paid for this. And for me, it's very relaxing. In addition, because I do computer programming, I write in Pascal, and different languages, but it's nice to be able to create in a different way other than just writing code. Now that we have the basting stitch in, you notice you don't have to be so careful when you get to the ends. Now let's take a look at this again. Now, as you can see, it has a better hem. It's more aligned. It's a little bit even like that though. And now it's turn it on the other end, so you can see what it looks like from the outside. What it's going to look like from the outside like that though. See, pretty much so. Now the thing about fixing the bobbin, I could show you that in another video. It's pretty easy to do. But before we end this segment, let me just show you something before we end this segment. Because it's also good when you do this, take a break. Because remember, this isn't a marathon. It's a series of steps that you're doing. Take a little break, and you can see how I'm trying to cut the edges and serge here. These Guggenheim shears are really good. A best investment. I'm actually going to buy some pinking shears from. But when you do fix it, you got to remember to keep this key. This is the church key that allows you to fix the Singer, because basically, let me just pause this for a moment. Now, when you're fixing the Singer, there's two screws. There's one here. There's one here. Use this church key to take it off. And then the best thing I would recommend is take the foot off. And remember, what happens, this comes out this way. It comes out this way. It comes out from the back. So you lift up the sewing assembly because it's spring loaded, and you push this out. And then what you got to do is you got to make sure you reseat the bobbin. And the way to do it is you turn it, and what happens is when it turns, the needle, you'll see the needle catching the thread on the inside. And then once you do that, then you put this back on. And like changing a tire, you first start one screw, then you start the other screw, then you screw both in, but just hand tight. Just hand tight. Don't do it machine tight. Well, for this segment, I'm going to take a little break, and then what happens, I'll show you what we'll do in the next segment when we finish up the skirt, and we add the hem on top, as well as adding the elastic.